Today is Saturday, February 18th, 2023, and I'm going to read Isaiah chapter 20. It's a pretty short chapter, and it's really interesting, and I think I'm just going to start reading. In the year that Tartan came unto Ashdod, when Sargon the king of Assyria sent him, and fought against Ashdod, and took it. At the same time spake the Lord by Isaiah the son of Amoz, saying, Go and loose the sackcloth from off thy loins, and put off thy shoe from thy foot. And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. Okay, so this is a huge sign, and very interesting. Why would God ask Isaiah to strip naked? How naked was he? Well, I think that there's some hints in verse 4, how naked. But I think that it means 100% naked here. I think that the word naked here is being literal. I think God told Isaiah to strip naked, and he prophesies for 3 years, it says in verse 3. And I looked up some commentary on this, and I have to agree that it seems that why he asked Isaiah to strip naked is very important for a couple reasons. And it's interesting that one of the reasons goes to the past, before Isaiah, and then one of them is kind of alluding to a future event. So I find that really interesting. So Adam and Eve, after they eat the forbidden fruit, they realized their nakedness and felt shame. And that gets talked about in verse 5 too, ashamed. Afraid and ashamed. Being naked too, you do feel a sense of fear. I would say like you feel very vulnerable to be naked. And shame. And so the future naked event is Jesus at the crucifixion. And there was prophecy fulfilled that Jesus's clothing lots would be cast for Jesus's clothes. And it was customary for people to be stripped naked at crucifixion. And of course, all of the depictions that we see in the iconography in the churches and stuff usually have Jesus covered, but in all actuality, he probably was stripped completely naked because it was part of the shame. They wanted to shame these people. So I think that's why that symbolism is so important. And it is interesting to me that it comes in threes. The Adam and Eve, Isaiah being prophesied or being instructed to strip naked and preach for 3 years, and then Jesus being stripped naked at crucifixion. I think that's significant. And I guess it's worth pointing out here, somebody mentioned in the other video in the comments that Ethiopia was just an old name for the entirety of Africa. And I think that sounds reasonable. Okay, continuing on. So shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptians. Oh, I don't think I actually read all of verse 3, so I'll start there. And the Lord said, Like as my servant Isaiah hath walked naked and barefoot 3 years for a sign and wonder upon Egypt and upon Ethiopia, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptians prisoners, and the Ethiopians captives, young and old, naked and barefoot, even with their buttocks uncovered, to the shame of Egypt. So this verse is talking about shame. This is the verse that makes it pretty clear that even their butts were uncovered. Okay, like, you could start splitting hairs and wondering, does it matter at that point if like a tiny little strip, but isn't that what a loincloth is? They tells them to take a sackcloth. I don't know. I'm just going to go out on a limb and guess, whatever, that he was 100% naked. And I think it was supposed to be a sort of spectacle. Like, whoa, who is this guy walking naked through the city? And so the slaves, there probably is a long history of slaves being stripped naked. And really, yeah, the power dynamic too, it's very symbolic of what was going to happen to these people. They're going to be stripped naked and feel the shame and feel the powerlessness of like being a slave who's stripped down and being walked away in cuffs. Okay, continuing. And they shall be afraid and ashamed of Ethiopia, their expectation, and of Egypt, their glory. And the inhabitant of this isle shall say in that day, Behold, such is our expectation, whither we flee for help to be delivered from the king of Assyria, and how shall we escape? Okay, so really interesting chapter from the Bible, a short one. Maybe it gets you interested in history, Assyria. Maybe it's a topic worth looking up. So Assyrians, from what I can tell, were just like the very first, or maybe one of the biggest, baddest war machines. So don't pay attention to the details would be my advice, or take anything that Wikipedia says with a grain of salt, of course. And who knows what is legitimate artifact and what is something that somebody made last week and weathered to look old. But it's still fun to look at old stuff. While aiming to secure defensible frontiers, he would launch raids further inland against his opponents as a means of securing economic benefit, as he did when campaigning in the Levant. The result meant that the economic prosperity of the region would fuel the Assyrian war machine. I thought this was interesting. All of the opponents. It's like Assyria was just a war machine. Imagine having that many opponents and not being afraid. 300,000 plus men. This brings me to the last video where it said that Egypt would be like unto a woman, that Egypt would be made into a woman. Also, you could think of having no army. Men, this is almost one of those flip sides where men are almost the disposable cannon fodder. We count armies with just men like they're pieces in a board game, 300,000 men. Men are almost the expendable unit of warfare. And yeah, so that's just something to think about. With people's armies, it's always calculated with men, how many men they had. Back when war was real. I liked this cartoon down here. It was actually pretty funny. It was actually a really cool cartoon. Okay, so I'll just read this. I thought this was interesting. So this gives you an idea of the Assyrian war machine. Asher, the great lord, I rushed upon the enemy like the approach of a hurricane. I put them to rout and turned them back. I transfixed the troops of the enemy with javelins and arrows. Humban Undasha, the commander-in-chief of the king of Elam, together with his nobles, I cut their throats like sheep. My prancing steeds, trained to harness, plunged into their welling blood as into a river. The wheels of my battle chariot were bespattered with blood and filth. I filled the plain with corpses of their warriors like herbage. Wow. Assyrians flaying their prisoners alive. And this, maybe this is one of those ways that God can use evil. God could use some pretty wicked, evil war machine nations to fulfill his will, to fulfill prophecy against places that turned against God. And yeah, it's just interesting to think of just ruthless, dark, evil. I feel like this gets brought up a lot of times in outer space media. A lot of times there will be this like mysterious, just like bloodthirsty, pure evil race that just comes and conquers. And anyways, that's just what the Assyrians feel like. I fought daily without interruption against Taraka, the king of Egypt and Ethiopia, the one accursed by all the great gods. Just when I read about this Assyrian stuff, yeah, just you really feel the times, all the idolatry, paganism going on, and how real the wars were back then, and the conquering of city, the pillaging. It really feels medieval. 5 times I hit him with the point of my arrows, inflicting wounds from which he should not recover, and then I laid siege to Memphis, his royal residence, and conquered it in half a day by means of mines, breaches, and assault ladders. It's very interesting. Well, that's it for this video. This is kind of a cool thing. Is that like a war machine right here? I don't know. Hope you enjoyed this video. God bless everyone.